help us connect and understand each other and understand things in life. Sometimes stories explain things that we need some explanation for. Now, let me tell the story and let's see. And I'll tell the story, and if some of you know the answer at the end we'll all say it together. And then maybe, if some of you don't, maybe next week Mr. Janisek will put a little bit into the curriculum. So, now, not too long ago, how many know Gabrielle Giffords, who that is? Anybody know who Gabrielle Giffords? She was she's a politician from Tucson. And you remember about a year ago there was a shooting and she was shot? Anybody remember that? Yeah. Her husband is an astronaut. And while she was in the hospital, he flew off and went into the space shuttle. Anybody know that her husband was an astronaut? Now, long before he went into outer space, long before, who was the first man in outer space? Anybody know? No, not the first American, but the first man in space. Who knows? Who knows?
Lance Armstrong?
Lance Armstrong, he's a bike rider. Neil Armstrong was the first man to do what?
To step foot on the moon.
Step foot on the moon.
And his partner.
And his partner, but Neil Armstrong was the first. Who knows who the first man in space was? Oh, you forgot. Anybody? First American in space was John Glenn. Anybody know the first person before John Glenn? He was a Russian man. His name was Yuri Gagarin. The first Russians got to space before the Americans did. But long before Yuri Gagarin or John Glenn or Neil Armstrong, on a far, far, far away planet in another universe lived a race of giants. Now these giants could travel in space. They were like jet setters. They'd get into their spaceships and they'd go off for a day and come back. They'd fly all over the universe. Now one day, a family of giants, a mother and a father and their daughter, got in their spaceship and they set off to find a place to have a picnic. Now they flew into different solar systems and they flew into a place and they looked down and there they saw a very green and inviting planet. And then they got a little closer and they saw a green island. And they set their spaceship down on that island. That's where they would have their picnic. Now, while the mother and father got the lunch basket out, the little girl, who was a giant, remember, she went off exploring and she went to different parts of where they were, and she found some stones, some white stones, and she gathered them up in her apron and she brought them back to the little hillside where they were having a picnic. She laid them down and then it was time for their picnic and they began to eat their lunch. Now the mother and father looked at each other and they kind of winked and they smiled because now was the time they were going to tell their daughter something very important. Oh, and they looked at her and they told her that very soon she would have a little baby brother. Oh, she was so excited. She'd been waiting a long time to have a little brother. Oh, she wanted a brother to play with and to teach things to. Oh, mother, father, I'm so excited. I can teach him all sorts of things, just like in drama club. I can teach him how to play and how to act. We can make a little place in the backyard. She took those stones she had and she started piling up on top of each other and making little structures like a little stage where she could teach her little brother to play act. The mother and father smiled at each other. They were so happy that she was going to have a little brother. Well, it got to be late in the afternoon and it was time for them to go home. So they gathered up their picnic basket and blanket and they got into the spaceship. Now, the young girl knew that she could not take anything with her from any place they visited. So she left those stones there, right by the hillside, by that picnic place. And they got in their spaceship and they flew home, never ever again, to visit that place where they had a picnic.
Oh, I know.
Now, hang on just a minute. Thousands and thousands of years later, the stones that she had left there have been studied by scientists and historians, and nobody can understand exactly how those stones got there and how they got in that specific shape in that place. But you, I think, and some of you, having heard this story, you might just believe that those stones were left there by the daughter of a race of giants. That those stones were left there at that picnic place on the small hillside on a green island that we now know as England, and in a place that we call everybody together Stonehenge. How many people knew that? How many people knew that? Raise your hands. So about 4 or 5, 6 of you. So now maybe next week or sometime, Mr. Janisic will tell you about Stonehenge. It's a place where there are a bunch of stones, and they're all in a circle, and nobody knows exactly why they're there. Oh, you remember that now. Now, that's a story that I made up. That's a story that I made up. That's one possible explanation as to maybe how Stonehenge came to be.
My favorite part was when Mark told the Stonehenge story, when he made up his own story about how Stonehenge came to be.
Well, I liked when sign language debate when the king put up 2 fingers. And he's like, I think he was gonna poke my eyes out, so I put up 1. And then
That was funny.
When he pulled out the moldy cheese and said, and then the chicken guy thought that was his lunch, so then he pulled out his too.
I liked how Mark told about the Stonehenge and how it came to be, how the giants came to went all over the universe, and then they found Earth, and then they went there to have a picnic.
I also liked the Stonehenge story because I liked how he made it up himself and used his creativity to kind of get the story.
I liked that how our storyteller, that he had a creative thinking about the giants and hedgestone, that could actually happen, but it's very unlikely, but it could.